from far from Vesuvius to close to Vesuvius, Ken Cioffredi here on the Calcio Guys. Adriano Donardo, Gianni Del Colli, I'm Nicholas Di Giovanni. As I said, so from the Far From Vesuvius podcast, we do have Ken. How's it going?
Yo, what's up, guys? How you guys doing? I'm doing good. Back in the groove after coming back from Italy. So, yeah, I'm doing good.
And Adriano, I don't know if Adriano can still hear us, but the video looks frozen on his end, so I don't know if he's still on the call. But we'll let you take the floor, Ken. So you went to Italy. You got 2 games.
Yes.
You caught the Derby della Giannini. Roma Napoli, and then you caught.
I am Napoli. Still insanely jealous about that, by the way.
Yeah. And then you caught the Napoli Bologna, but
Yes.
you know we want to talk to you about your trip to Italy. We want to talk about Calcio. Let's start about this trip. I mean, was it a last minute thing? Did you plan a couple months in advance? How did this come about?
Yeah. I planned it a few months in advance with some friends. One of my friends who I'm actually in a Napoli group chat with, he was like, yo, I'm going to go to try to catch a few games. And I was like, let me see the dates. And I looked, and flights were pretty inexpensive. So we just booked it. And that was that for as far as planning goes. And then I was like, okay, let's figure out which games we're going to go to. And it linked up perfectly well that we were able to go see the Derby della Sole, and then see Napoli Bologna. That was our last. The last night in Italy was the Napoli Bologna game. So it was a really good time. Hung out with a bunch of friends. Obviously, ate a ton of good food. Got to see 2 matches. The Roma Napoli match was an interesting experience because we couldn't really sit in the Napoli fan section because me and my friends fan card, which you need to sit in the away sections for these games, was still in transit and delayed by 6 weeks. And then ironically, it showed up at our friend's house the second day we were in Naples. So we ended up getting the cards when we were in Italy, but too late to go sit with the Napoli supporters in Rome. So in Rome, it was 3 of us together, and we basically sat in the Curva Nord with a bunch of Roma fans, sort of flying under the radar. But yeah, it was a blast. I had a great time. I had a great time at both matches. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, go ahead.
No, was there any moments that kind of stood out during that game? I mean, it is a derby. Was there any funny chants that you heard, or any interesting comments that were thrown? Especially if you were sitting in enemy territory. Sometimes you just feel the worst.
It was really interesting sitting sort of basically in the curve. We were technically in the Distinti, which is adjacent to the Curva, but in the Stadio Olimpico, the Curva is so big that I think for control of such a big stand, they've broken it into 3 sections. There's the official Curva, and then there's 2 Distintis on either side, but they're pretty large. In comparison to the Maradona, the Curva is very large at the Olimpico. But a lot of classic, rile up the Napoli fans type stuff. And then there was more chants towards Spalletti. Obviously, there's a history with Spalletti and Roma, so lots of Spalletti pezza di merda. And there was a couple of territorial, discriminating chants towards Napoli, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but that's okay. But the match was really tense, obviously, and then 0-0. And we were sitting, so Napoli was shooting in our end of the second half. And I remember when Osimhen scored, because the whole match we really just didn't react to anything, because we really were basically amongst only Roma fans. And they were kind of onto us. They were noticing we weren't really cheering when Roma was doing something good, and they were just sort of leer at us. But when Osimhen scored and it was offside, and when he did, we didn't know right away. So I'm sitting on the left of one of my friends, and I just squeezed his thigh as hard as I could because I thought we had scored, and I was trying not to jump out of my seat. So that was sort of my reaction to just kind of keep it together. But then it ended up coming back. But It was a really, really tense match. Obviously, both of the managers got sent off in the game. A lot of yellow cards. It was a 0-0 draw. It was a really, really fun experience. This was my first time at the Olimpico, and it's really, in comparison to the Maradona, it's really this whole like grandiose. You walk up to the stadium. It takes like 20 minutes once you get to the park that the stadium is at, to your actual seats. So it was a really, there's all these huge statues everywhere. It's really, it's a really cool complex. And I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the Olimpico is larger right now as it stands in the Maradona. I think that it probably holds like 70,000 or something like that. But it was pretty full, as full as it could be. I think it's 75% capacity in all of the Serie A stadiums right now. Yeah. So it was wild. It was a lot of fun. And two characters and coaches. You had Mourinho and Spalletti. Mourinho's really starting to turn up the antics, it seems, in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you guys watched the match yesterday. Yeah. And it's a couple games in a row now where he's stepping up his Mourinho type antics. But yeah, it was the match against Roma was a really tense affair. So I'm glad I got to sort of take some of the pressure off of the second game I went to.
Yeah. So let's, like you said it beautifully there, Ken, being at the Olimpico, in the away section, that's like really, you have to have balls to do something like that. I know you had a bit of your mix up there, but that's a lot of balls. I got to give it to you, Ken, and your friends there. But I guess we'll shift over quickly just to the next game that you did go to, because you were lucky enough to catch 2 games in Italy. Stepping foot into the Maradona, how was that for you? You off air, you said you've been before. I didn't catch if it was at the Maradona or if it was away, but what was your thoughts going to now the Maradona and just that game against Bologna and just your whole experience there? Yeah,
so it was my second time at the Maradona. Last time I went, it was still the San Paolo. So for me, it's still weird to say it. My instinct is still just to call it the San Paolo. For me, it doesn't quite like ring off of the tongue as much to call it the Maradona. But yeah, it's a really cool experience. It's way different than Rome's, because the Olimpico is sort of set off in its own huge park. There's like a whole sports complex. There's like a tennis stadium, and then the Olimpico is there. At the Maradona, it's really just sort of like plopped in the middle of a neighborhood in Fuorigrotta. So I went with some friends, and it was really cool. It was, you sort of park your car. We were with some friends, and you walk up, and it was you go up, and we were sitting in the Curva B, which is the second time I've sat there, and nice. It's a little bit different right now because not everyone knows this, but the ultras in Napoli are not going to the games right now. There is a dispute with De Laurentiis and the way he's handling there's sort of like a dispute over fines and where people are sitting and not waving flags, and it's really a whole situation. So
I saw something on Twitter about that. I saw somebody reshare, and it was super quiet in the Curva B, and I was like, this is not right. This is a bit off. So
was that a buzzkill? Was that a buzzkill for you, Ken?
It wasn't a buzzkill completely, but it's definitely different. The first time I went, there was flags and it was a lot louder. But that was also, ironically, the last time I went was also the reverse fixture of Napoli-Roma. So I've seen Napoli-Roma in person twice, once at the Olimpico and once in Naples. But
wow, you're really living my experience, right?
Yes, yeah. So it was still a lot of fun, and there was a lot of fans. But there's no one to lead the chants. There's no flags. There's no drums. There's no capo. So there is definitely something missing right now, and it's a little bit of a bummer. But it's still a blast. Anytime you get to go to Italy, especially living in North America, you get to go to Italy and get to see your team play. To me, in the moment, it didn't bother me at all. But yeah, it's definitely a different experience. at the Maradona, there's like a bunch of food vendors and people hanging out outside before the game. It's like a much more. It's much more of a whole event. It feels like, everyone's hanging out 2 or 3 hours before the match, showing in the area. Everyone's grabbing their food before you go in. At the Olimpico, it's so set away from the rest of the city. People are just sort of like getting to the stadium, going to the game, and then leaving. In Napoli, it feels more like a party before the game. Everyone's
it's kind of can reflect to maybe the North American tailgate, if you will.
Exactly.
In terms of like NFL football and stuff like that. So
it's got more of a pregame party vibe in Naples for sure. That's people are hanging out. People are buying their little their little coffee liqueurs and then we're all taking shots before the game and hanging out and buying our food, and everyone's bringing their frittata into the game to eat at halftime. It's really, in Napoli, it feels a lot more like a party and less like a match. In the Olimpico, it was much more like get down to business, and everyone sort of like leaves and gets in their scooters or their cars and goes home. But I mean, the match we saw in Napoli this time was great. I mean, Fabian scores a banger and then a couple of penalties, and everyone goes home happy. So it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to see where we're at. I don't think anyone would have guessed.
Ken, you're talking about the atmosphere. So I know for the Bologna game, that was a Thursday night.
Yes.
And one thing I said on the podcast last week was that I noticed across the Serie A with these midweek games, the atmosphere was down a bit. I was watching even like the Lazio-Fiorentina game, not a lot of people at the Olimpico. Same thing with Juventus against Sassuolo, very, very empty, all things considered. Do you think that also kind of contributed to that lack of atmosphere a bit at the Maradona?
It could have been, yeah. I mean, anytime there's midweek fixtures, I think it's probably a little bit harder for people to come with families and that type of stuff. There was still a ton of kids at the game, but yeah, I think especially with any team that's in European competition, you're playing every 3 days. So I mean, I think the week before, like a couple of days before the Roma game, when Napoli played Legia, I think there was only like 7,000 fans or 8,000 fans because it's a Europa League match. There's the middle of the week, a derby coming up on the weekend. It's hard to keep that retention all year round. Plus, with the Maradona, it's not as easy to get to as the Olimpico. Probably it's not as it's in town, but it's not as centralized and so it's a little bit more difficult to get to the stadium. It's not super easy. There is like a metro line that comes, but if they play late, a lot of times the metro isn't running when the game's over, so it's a whole thing. Napoli is a special place with its own set of special rules.
That's
it's the Italian way. They're stubborn. They do their thing. They stop at the hour. It doesn't matter what event's going on.
Exactly.
It's the Italian way.
The metro guy had to catch the game, so that's why I couldn't drive.
It's like one of my friends after the match was like rushing to catch the last bus because he lives in like this Centro Storico of Napoli, and he's like, this is the last bus I have to run. So it's